Live. Good morning. I'd like to welcome everyone to our first community chat of the 2018-2019. As everybody's realized by now, we're operating with a new format this year in an attempt to reach with us as we work the process. A better learning environment is ultimately going to be better for all of our students. Long term, and I talked about this at our last work session board meeting, is we are looking at the potential of a bond issue to potentially include in a bond that I want to discuss with students for classes, and I think we can do better than that. You can see from the cafeteria here how easy it is to make a facelift, to make this a better learning environment for our students. Looking at the entire building and looking at upgrades across the building, as well as the potential of an expansion, so we no longer, this has been at the forefront, especially through last school year with some of the incidences that we had. I do want to assure you that we do provide a very safe school environment. However, we want to be proactive and continue to do things to make the school environment even more safe. We have a safety committee that works together, which includes local law enforcement as well as key administrators in the building. And we are going to be taking time throughout the course of the school year to look at the district as a whole and discuss ways that we can make an even safer school environment. Now, when implementing new safety items, procedures, some of them may be low-cost items, some of them might be higher-cost items, and that's why school safety for K through 12 could potentially be part of a bond issue to provide those funds to put more safety devices and procedures into place across the district. The third item that's of importance to me, and I've heard loud and clear that it's of importance to many of our parents, students, and staff, is the lack of air conditioning in 3 of our buildings, and that's Claggett, Canavan, and Fenn. Part of the bond issue could be implementing air conditioning in those buildings. It is something that we looked at quite a while ago before my time in the district, and we were talking at that time several $1 million in order to be able to make that happen. It's not as simple as just installing central air. I mean, a lot of these buildings have to have ductwork put in, and a big issue, especially at Fenn, is the electricity and its inability to handle the large intake of electricity that an air unit would require. So putting in air conditioning doesn't just involve potentially going to create the best environment for our students. Again, we are not acting on any of these. We're in the discussion phases. What I'd really like to hear from the community as well is other upgrades that you feel should or need to occur within the district. A bond issue would be specifically for facilities. A fourth thing that a bond issue, and it's to nobody's fault. It was trying to catch a bundle of bricks. The most I can done. Final item where we have to. We are to move on to the media center because I do want to share the media center with everybody as well. But before I do that, I want to ask our audience that's here if there's any questions in regards to a potential bond issue, the process that we will be following moving forward, or facility upgrades. Yes? That's actually a really good question. And just to reiterate, because I want to make sure that everybody heard, is why are we exploring putting air conditioning into older buildings? And that there's been a past message that the buildings are too old to invest that kind of money into. And the answer is we don't know quite yet. It's been several years since that's even been explored as an option. Since then, there's been a lot of advancements in HVAC and the ability to install HVAC systems into older facilities at lower costs. So I think it would be irresponsible for us to not explore using existing facilities instead of looking at doing rebuilds or adding new buildings. One thing we are going to do, though, to address that is I want to bring outside experts in. I'm an educator. I'm not a contractor, or I'm not an engineer. So we're actually going to have the Ohio Facilities Council, which is a state organization, come in and do an assessment on our buildings, not just our older buildings, but all of our buildings, so that they can give us professional feedback about building needs and the direction to go with buildings. And they might come in and say, you know what, if you need to do an expansion to Claggett, you might as well just start over. I don't know that yet, and we're waiting to get that feedback. They might say, you know what, this is a really sound facility. We just need to do some facelifting and upgrading like we did here in the cafeteria, and that might be a more cost-effective option. So we're still exploring all the potential options that are out there of rebuilding versus adding air. And I think the other question you kind of bring up is, do we really look at adding air conditioning to the buildings that we don't have? Is that a cost that we want to take on as a community? And I think that's why we need to have that discussion before we go look at a bond issue and say, hey, we're putting in air and it's part of this bond issue. We want to make sure that's something that the community values and wants to pay for. And the question was, what is the time frame on the assessment period in regards to the facilities? Typically, the Ohio Facilities Council doesn't come out and look at facilities until spring. That wasn't an option for us this past year because we were in the middle of our operating levy campaign. So John Burkhart, our business director, is actually working with Ohio Facilities Council right now to get them in this fall. Our goal is to try and have an assessment and a decision before the end of the school year. So our timeline is this spring to be able to let the community know this spring the direction that we want to go. Ideally, if we could have the bond up next November, I think that would give us a good timeline in terms of moving forward with any potential construction or updates to the facilities. But like I said, right now, this is a very temporary timeline, and I think we're going to have a better idea once we get OFC into the district. Well, we're going to follow a very similar process to what we did with our strategic planning, just a little more condensed. We are going to have a community meeting where we present and review all of the results. We are then, after we let out general information, going to work with small groups and committees to prioritize, just like we did with the strategic plan. Because when you start getting feedback, we're going to get all kinds of feedback, which is great. That's exactly what we want. But then we need to work with the community to decide what are the priorities, because everything that comes up isn't going to be able to be completed. And once we come up with a consensus, we'll put out some sort of a survey with kind of the top items so that we can work with all our parents and staff in terms of prioritizing those, and then roll out a final decision, hopefully not too late into the spring. What we will do is we'll continue to tape, whether we do meetings live or whether we tape them and just put them up on YouTube, because we want to make sure that all that information is easily accessible to all the community. The other thing that we'll do is, and I've talked to John a little bit about this, but some of the things the Ohio Facilities Council points out that maybe need some repairing or updating, we'll take pictures of those as well, and so you can actually see what we're talking about that and make those accessible to everybody. Any other questions? Great. Well, we're actually going to take a slight pause in our action here this morning. We're going to need about 10 minutes to move up to our media center. We're going to move a little bit off of facilities, even though you're going to be able to see all the new facilities upstairs. Tina, our Director of Curriculum, is going to talk about the new Makerspace. I had the opportunity to stop in there first thing this morning and saw it in action. Is quite impressive. Students making circuits out of Play-Doh. So I think it's a great addition to Claggett. We also have a Makerspace over at Garfield, and our goal is to start rolling these out across the district to expand our students' academic opportunities. So we will be back in 10 minutes.